Good day, everybody. We're talking about one of my favorite topics today, which is emotional eating, because most of us are emotional and we're eaters. So this one is what I call HALT, and the acronym stands for hungry, angry, lonely, and tired. So those are the top 4 reasons why most of us eat. So we talked about food for fuel and food for pleasure before. Now we're going to talk about what goes wrong when we kind of waver in between there. So the H stands for hunger, and I think hunger is a really important reason to eat. That one doesn't require much explanation. Remember that if you're fueled properly, then you can actually listen to your hunger signals. So hunger, we can check the box for that one. Let's move on to the other emotions: angry, lonely, and tired. So angry can actually play a massive role in your food choices. So in my clinic, when I see people on a daily basis, I hear a lot of the times, "Myra, I was really doing well with my eating, and then my boss really upset me and I ate XYZ." Or, "I was doing really well, and then my kids, they drove me crazy, and I was so angry that I reached for a whole tin of Haagen-Dazs and I ate it." So my question always to them is, did you feel better, the same, or worse after you ate the food in your relation to your emotion? So most of us felt worse because we weren't eating for fuel, and we weren't eating for pleasure. We were eating to actually hide an emotion that we couldn't let out. So let's talk about anger. So one of my favorite things to do in terms of anger is stop and pause. So if you can't let your anger back out at the person that you're angry with, because it's your boss, or you're trying to save a relationship, or a myriad of reasons that you just can't let that anger or frustration through, you need to think about finding another outlet. So other outlets can be things like exercise. They can be meditation. They can be as simple as taking some deep breaths and just reassessing the situation. There's a lot of anger that came through COVID, which we'll talk about in one of our other series, but sometimes anger is just really fleeting, and you don't need to do anything about it. You just need to recognize it and let it go. Don't let it stay inside of you and consume food to try to mask the anger. Easier said than done, I know. This is a really short video series and I'm just touching on the surfaces of these, but anger is a big reason of our emotions why we reach for things that we didn't want to reach for. The L stands for lonely. So even though Bermuda is a very happy, friendly, small community, oftentimes we can still feel lonely. We can feel lonely in a marriage. We can feel lonely even though we have 3 children. We can feel lonely even being a school teacher. We can especially feel lonely when we're isolated. So it's important to actually think of ways to expand your interactions with people. That may be at this point in time through social media. It can be by going old-fashioned and writing letters. Another great way to combat loneliness is actually to have a grateful journal. So sometimes when we're lonely or sad, we start to dwell on all the things that are negative. Let's take the hurricane for an example, is that we get so much anxiety, but also loneliness because of isolation during a pre-hurricane and post-hurricane period, that we forget how beautiful Bermuda is. We forget all the people that came and helped us out during the hurricane, all the good things. So a grateful journal can just be a simple piece of paper. It can be on your notepad. It can be a beautiful journal. But I find it very useful for a lot of clients just to put pen to paper and start to be grateful for all the amazing things that actually happen every day in their life. Last one is tired. So how many of us have been tired and exhausted? 2020 has been an interesting year. So the reason that we reach for foods that may be empty calorically when we're tired is what I said in Food for Fuel series, is that our brain knows that sugar is the fastest way to get that spike up. It's why we don't give all the kids running around lots of sugary things and have them go into what we call a sugar high. So when we're tired, we will tend to reach for the things that give us instant gratification. So what we talked about in food for fuel versus pleasure was trying to make sure that you're fueling yourself so that you don't get tired. Special shout out to my shift workers, because you guys have the hardest challenge in terms of being your best you. It is not natural for you to be a shift worker. So it may be natural for you to be a nighttime person or a morning person. For most people, shift working puts an undue amount of stress on their nutritional habits. So we're, in those cases, more likely to give a little bit more extended carbohydrates with fiber in them, a little bit more protein, and try to match the amount of energy that you need in your system to your workday. But let's go back to tiredness. So if we really wanted to combat tired, we go back to using foods in a functional basis. So getting in the right amount of protein, enough carbohydrates to sustain you, and also, as we talked about before, some good fat. So I mentioned before not eating enough. So not eating enough can also play a huge role in terms of you being tired, because you don't have enough energy. Sometimes I'll ask a simple question to my clients: do you wake up at 3 or 4 in the morning for no apparent reason? Because if you do, it may be your brain signaling you that you don't have enough energy. So hungry, you're going to eat. If you're angry, we're going to try and figure out how we're actually going to recognize that emotion, acknowledge it, and then find an outlet for it. Exercise, meditation, breathing, talking calmly with the person that made you upset so that they understand and you release that anger. Loneliness, you can look to expanding your outward group, whether through hobbies, social media, interactions with people, joining a group, speaking to a pastor, speaking to a teacher, speaking to anybody that's in your relevant profession that you're comfortable speaking with, having a grateful journal. And then tired, I can't stop you from being tired, but I can really talk about the importance of sleep on another segment. But we're trying to use food for fueling you through so you don't get to that tired stage. So if you want to talk more about emotional eating, because we've really just touched the surface of it, you've got some good resources with psychologists and psychiatrists in Bermuda. Don't be afraid to use those resources. You can reach out to a functional nutritionist and behavioral change specialist like myself, or you can do a lot of reading in that area. There's lots of great books on emotional eating as well. But trust me, you are not alone. We'll see you on the next segment. Thanks a lot.